This past week, Xbox had their developer direct, showing off a whole bunch of games coming to Xbox this year. In this particular showcase, a lot of stuff coming out within the first half of the year. And I gotta say, this might have actually been my favorite Xbox showcase in really the last decade, at least since the start of the Xbox One. And I don't want to focus too much on what was at the Direct because a little bit of time has passed and I feel like most people kind of know what's going on. But I do want to talk a little bit in context to, why a lot of these announcements are particularly exciting. And more importantly, with this and some kind of following information really paints a picture for the rest of Xbox's year. So real quick, first let's just go over what was at the Direct. And the first thing I want to talk about is really the one I'm going to spend the most time on, of the four at least. We got the reveal of a brand new Ninja Gaiden. This was the surprise dev feature that they had for the Direct, and it was actually two devs, where we have Team Ninja, the team traditionally responsible for developing and making the Ninja Gaiden games, who are working in collaboration on this title with Platinum, who's responsible for a whole bunch of fantastic action titles, including Nier Automata, Bayonetta, Metal Gear Rising, awesome action titles underneath their belt, and they are bringing that experience to reviving the Ninja Gaiden franchise. Which this surprise reveal is a big deal for, honestly, a whole bunch of different reasons. First off, the fact that we are getting a brand new Ninja Gaiden. It is a mainline entry, and it is being properly called 4. They're not rebooting it. They're not doing a side game. This is a follow-up to the last set of games, though it is mixing things up a bit by having a new protagonist alongside the traditional one, Ryu Hayabusa. And all the bits of gameplay that we were able to see for this title looks absolutely amazing. Another big part of this reveal is the fact that Platinum's working on it. If you haven't necessarily paid close attention to this, Platinum, there's been a little bit of doom and gloom about over the past couple months, basically since the Game Awards, when we got the reveal of a new Okami game, and part of the kind of additional follow-up news behind that was realizing how much staff has been leaving Platinum over the past year. And that was raising a bit of a question of, well, what exactly is Platinum working on right now? Which talent is still there? And what can we actually have to look forward to anytime soon? And now we have that answer with them working with Team Ninja on this new Ninja Gaiden title. And another huge part about this reveal is that to help, I think, kind of remind everyone what this franchise is about and build some immediate hype for this new entry, they shadow dropped Ninja Gaiden 2 Black. This is effectively an additional remaster of Ninja Gaiden 2. There was a past one called Sigma, but this is a newer one, updating the game to Unreal Engine 5. It is not exclusive to Xbox, though it is on Game Pass, giving you an easier way to dive in and play right away if you have that service. And I dove back into this game because I haven't really played it since it originally released back in, I think it was like 2008. It's been way too many years. And wow. I forgot how incredibly good this game is. There are some adjustments with this new re-release. It is still easier than the original version, which I think is going to be a benefit for a lot of people first getting into this series, but if you want the challenge, higher difficulty levels are there. But it's such a reminder of how we don't really get this style of action game nearly as much anymore. I mean, don't get me wrong, I enjoy me some Souls-likes, and there are plenty of games that have taken cues from this formula, adapting it to other action games, whether that's God of War or the new Star Wars Jedi series of games. But there's a style of faster-paced action game that we just don't get nearly as many entries in lately, and Ninja Gaiden 2 is such a prime example of this style. It's something that I think has become a bit of a blank spot where we've had some faster action titles here and there, but none that hit it just quite right. And with how much I'm enjoying this new remaster of 2, it just builds up even more hype for the fact that we're getting an actual full brand new title later this year. Now, as for the release date for 4, that is not locked in just yet. They have said it's going to be fall 2025, but we don't have a specific month or time yet, which is an exception for this showcase because that was one of the other things about it that was really interesting. Locked in dates across the board. All 3 other games that they showcased, Expedition 33, South of Midnight, and Doom the Dark Ages, all got release dates locked in, basically specifically for April and May of this year, filling out the first half quite a bit for Xbox. Now, given some of these are third-party, Expedition 33 is not an Xbox exclusive, and in fact, actually a very weird thing about that is it looks like there's a collector's edition for it for PlayStation, but not on Xbox, even though it has been advertised with Xbox specifically. I don't know, it's a little odd. But South of Midnight and Doom the Dark Ages are obviously Xbox first party, and while it did not make an appearance at the Developer Direct, we're also getting Avowed in February. So that's 3 first-party Xbox games all filling up the first half of the year, which is honestly a momentum we have not been seeing as much of them, especially with all three of them looking pretty much fantastic in my opinion. I don't want to spend too much more time talking about the Direct, but again, I really want to emphasize how all four of these games just honestly look fantastic. The art style in South of Midnight is wonderful. I love how it's actually playing with perceived frame rates in order to create more of a stop motion feeling to the gameplay, along with just some great looking enemy and boss designs. Expedition 33 is honestly probably my most anticipated game this year, or very close to it. I talked about this a little bit back when it was first revealed at SGF last year, where, I love turn-based RPGs, and it has been such a long time since we got one that had this kind of visual style. We got plenty of retro style pixel ones, we've got anime ones, but we haven't had this kind of art style since, I want to say, Lost Odyssey, and everything they've been showing about it, including the time-based mechanics for the combat, just looks fantastic. And then last but not least, Doom: The Dark Ages, it looks good. I will say there is a part of me where I'm not sure if I'm sold on the idea of them opening it up to a more semi-open world approach. It sounds like we're going to have way larger stages, which part of what I liked about Doom and Doom Eternal is that we had somewhat traditional level design with a bit of exploration thrown in, nooks and crannies to discover and not necessarily just a big wide open area. But I'm down to see how it works in practice. What I will say I absolutely love is the shield. I can't explain it. I don't know why this is a thing with me, but the moment I see an FPS where there's a shield and gun option, I am so much more excited, and everything we saw of the gameplay for it, how the shield is incorporated in combat, the different kind of weapons you can use. This game is just really shaping up into something that I cannot wait to get my hands on. So yeah, with all four of those games looking fantastic, a Shadow Drop title, actual hard release dates for everything except for the one game that was a surprise reveal, yeah, pretty awesome presentation, and again, I think my favorite one that Xbox has done in quite some time. The other thing about this, though, I want to talk about is what this means for the year ahead in Xbox. I did a video a couple weeks back just talking about the year ahead in general, and there were a few blanks for Xbox that this has now filled out a lot. And it also makes this year look much more compelling for them. Again, we now know that we're getting Avowed, South of Midnight, and Doom: The Dark Ages all within the first half of the year, along with some other great titles that are going to be third-party and or multi-platform coming to it on top of that. But beyond that, that still leaves quite a few titles that we know are targeting this year that are going to be coming out hopefully in the back half of 25, including the now revealed Ninja Gaiden 2, Outer Worlds 2, which, by the way, we're getting two different first-person Obsidian RPGs in the same year, which is awesome to me. That is something that I would like to see more of, so I'm excited to see both of those, assuming that Outer Worlds 2 doesn't get delayed, and Fable is also slated for this year. There are some other Xbox titles we've seen revealed in the past that could end up being surprise revealed for this year as well, things that didn't have attached release dates. For instance, the next game coming from inXile, but as it stands, there's at least these three first-party titles we can for sure look forward to happening this year, assuming there aren't further delays, which is a very stacked year for Xbox in general, especially when compared to how it's been the last few. And this has been something that's been a bit of a song and dance for Xbox the last decade, talking about where they're finding their momentum, when we're going to be seeing some great games come out back to back. And there have been those highs every now and then. There have been some excellent releases that have come out, but it always seems like every time there's a win, there's some kind of setback that ends up happening later. Whether that's because of direction choices that people aren't quite so sure about, or in particular, last year's news where we got studio closures, including Tango Gameworks, which I think was a really big, bad surprise for a lot of people. And I'm not gonna lie, there's still a bit of a sting that comes from that happening because they were responsible for making what was probably the most pleasant surprise, big hit Xbox game out of nowhere with Hi-Fi Rush, and the reward was being closed down. And that's obviously something I don't want to see keep happening. And so while there has been this very unsteady momentum and that up and down news over the last couple years, at least looking at ahead in 25 and what we have from this lineup, this might be the time we finally see Xbox really build up some true momentum. Not just having a singular big win amongst a sea of other titles, but having back-to-back great-looking games that obviously we're going to have to actually get our hands on and see how they fully turn out. But everything we've seen of them so far, especially the ones coming out in the first half of the year, instills, I think, quite a bit of confidence. Now, outside of the developer direct, there was something else that happened this past week that I want to touch on that also I think gives a little bit clearer picture of the direction Xbox is going. Phil Spencer did a couple of interviews recently, and the main one I want to point to comes from Gamertag Radio, and they did an interview as part of their own 20th anniversary that was about 25 minutes long with Phil Spencer, and there were a couple of, I think, very interesting things to pay attention to that came out of this interview. I definitely recommend giving it a listen yourself. I'll have that link down below. But the stuff I want to touch on primarily is Xbox reiterating their stance on their hardware as well as the future of the software. Look, one of the things that has been clearly a very unpopular decision, at least amongst hardcore fans, is the idea of Xbox opening up to more platforms. We're seeing a lot of titles come to PlayStation. Initially, there was just the 4 they talked about last year, and now that number is growing. Indiana Jones is coming out on it. It's looking pretty likely that a lot of the games at the showcase that are first party are going to make their way to PlayStation as well eventually. And there's even rumors of things like Halo titles making their way to PlayStation and Nintendo systems. And as part of this interview, he didn't really shout out PlayStation specifically, but as part of Nintendo revealing the Switch 2, talked about being excited to work more with Nintendo in the future. And there's a whole lot of stuff that, the regular Switch couldn't necessarily handle that was Xbox published. But now with the Switch 2 helping to close the gap power-wise, I would not be surprised to see a lot of Xbox titles make their way over to the system very quickly. Which, if you're not locked to just the Xbox as your system, is great news. There's going to be more ways to be able to access and play games across more platforms. But of course, that does also raise worries with the diehard fans of what does that mean for Xbox as a console if they're basically no longer having true exclusives, at most having timed ones. And this was something else touched on in the interview where Phil Spencer basically emphasized the idea that, look, yes, we are opening up more games to more platforms, but that doesn't mean we're going to be dropping the hardware. There are no plans to become a pure software developed focused company. They're always going to have a box that represents Xbox, and you can play their games wherever you think best. And ultimately, the goal, it sounds like, is to try and keep improving Xbox hardware itself in order to make that its own appealing choice, regardless of what software is able to play and which systems it's on. And obviously, as I mentioned in the last video going over the year ahead, there have also been those rumors of them getting into the handheld space, which probably isn't this year. That's something going to be a little farther out. But the point is, it does seem like Xbox is still dedicated to releasing hardware. The main sales pitch of that hardware is, I think, a big question mark for a lot of people right now, because ultimately, if there is one system that has exclusives and one that doesn't have any, that kind of seems like a big push in the direction of which one to buy. But we'll just have to see how the hardware market keeps moving in the future, and if an Xbox dedicated system that doesn't have certain exclusives like from PlayStation has something to offer. Or who knows, we might even be seeing a move eventually where PlayStation does open up, because at the end of the day, wider market is more profit, especially with how expensive some of these big AAA games are getting. The main point I want to come back to is this. I think there is a lot of reasons to be pessimistic about Xbox's future. Things that we've talked about in the past with things like studio closures and people not really being sure about some decisions like the reliance on Game Pass or opening up more games to third party. But when I look at the lineup of games shown at the Developer Direct, when I see the timeline of wonderful games coming out, whether they're timed exclusive or immediately going multi-platform, there's some absolutely fantastic stuff coming from Xbox devs where, yeah, I do feel a lot more optimistic about their prospects this year. How true this ends up all being at the end of the year, we'll find out. But for now, I really want to lean more into that optimism, because I look at these games and ultimately I want these studios to succeed. I want to see these games come out and for them to be things worth celebrating that people are going to fall in love with and enjoy. And I think this could be that year where more attitudes shift in that direction. So those are just some updated thoughts on Xbox's immediate future, at least, which is looking a lot more up. As always, if you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up button to let me know. Subscribe if you haven't yet. I got a lot more stuff planned coming up soon. I'm going to be leaning a little heavier in the Nintendo direction the next couple weeks, just because, that full Switch 2 reveal is going to be happening at the start of April, and there's a whole lot of questions I have about what the system's going to fully end up being like. But don't worry, there's going to be some Xbox and PlayStation sprinkled in there as well. So again, subscribe if you haven't yet. And until next time, I'll see you all later.